do you call a girl who sits at the feet of power? Not metaphorically, but literally? This is the King's Footholder, a Welsh fairy tale so bizarre it sounds like satire, until it starts cutting into questions we still ask today. What does it mean to be close to power, but powerless? What happens when desire overrules duty? How do you punish betrayal? With violence or transformation? Tonight, we're entering a world of satin-covered thrones, magical pigs, ritual humiliation, and a ruler who turns men into deer when they dishonour a woman. But first, I'm Lynx, author, creator, and dev, and if you enjoy these fairy tales where we break down the motivations and meanings behind the tale, or you just enjoy listening to fairy tales being read to you, got both of those for the Storybites, do me a favour, do the algorithmic things. Hit subscribe, it costs you nothing. Ring the bell, it'll let you know when I drop a new video just about every day. And if you would please, give it a like. It lets YouTube know that what I'm creating has value and will bring you more of what I've created. And back to the video right now. This is Storybite. The throne with a footrest. The King's Footholder. There was a curious custom in the far olden times of Wales. At the banqueting hall, the king of the country would sit with his feet in the lap of a high officer. Whenever His Majesty sat down to dinner, this official person would be under the table holding the royal feet. This was also the case while all sat around the evening fire in the middle of the hall. This foot-holding person was one of the king's staff, and every castle must have a human footstool as part of its furniture. By and by, it became the fashion for pretty maidens to seek this task, or to be chosen for the office. Their names in English sounded like footies, orthopede, or footlights. When she was plump and a petite maid, they nicknamed her 12 inches, or when unusually soothing in her caresses of the soft royal toes. It was considered a high honour to be the king's footholder. In after centuries, it was often boasted that of such and such an ancestor had held this honourable service. One picture of castle life, as given in one of the old books, now tells of how Caim, the king's officer, went to the mead cellar with a golden cup to get a drink that would keep them all wide awake. He also brought back a handful of skewers on which they were to broil the collops, or bits of meat, at the fire. While they were doing this, the king sat on a seat of green rushes, over which was spread a flame-coloured satin cover with a cushion like it for his elbow to rest upon. In the evening, the harpers and singers made music and the bards recited poetry, or the good storytellers told tales of heroes and wonder. During all this time, one or more maidens held the king's feet, or took turns at it when tired, for often the revels or songs and tales lasted far into the night. At intervals, if the story were dull, or he had either too much dinner or had been out hunting and got tired, His Majesty took a nap with his feet resting upon the lap of a pretty maiden. This happened often in the late hours, while they were getting the liquid refreshments ready. When the king's chamberlain gently nudged him to be wide awake, he again enjoyed the music and stories while his feet were held. For altogether it was great fun. Let's talk about ritual intimacy. In this court, the king doesn't put his feet on a footstool. He puts them in the lap of a young woman. It starts as tradition, and then becomes performance. Eventually, it's power theatre. To be the king's footholder was to be close to him, literally, but never equal. It's proximity without permission, status without agency. And it's a metaphor we still live in. How many people sit at the feet of institutions, movements, and systems, praised but not protected? This story begins with a woman holding a king's feet and ends with her being taken. The king who wants comfort more than power. Now, there was once a prince of Goewen in Wales named Marth, who was so fond of having his feet held that he neglected to govern his people properly. He spent all his time lounging in an easy chair, his tea, while a pretty maiden held his heels and toes. He committed all public cares to two of his nephews, These were named for short Gilly and Goewen. The one whom the king loved best to have her hold his feet was the fairest maiden in all the land, and she was named Goewen. By and by the prince grew so fond of having his feet held and stroked and patted and played with by Goewen that he declared that he could not live unless Goewen held his feet, and she said that if she did not hold the king's feet, her life would end. Now this Gilly, one of the king's nephews, son of Don, whom he had appointed to look after the day-to-day public affairs, would often be in the hall at night. Meet Prince Math. Yes, and yes, that's M-A-T-H. His name might sound logical, but his reign is anything but. Math doesn't lead, he lounges. He delegates governance to his two nephews, Gilly and Goewen, and instead of ruling, he gets his feet held. Goewen, the court's most beautiful and honoured maiden, becomes his preferred footholder. But this isn't about romance, it's about ritual codependency. Math claims he cannot live without Goewen holding his feet. Goewen said her life would end if she didn't. This isn't love, it's performance, attachment, and the illusion of intimacy that masks total imbalance. The nephew who wanted what he shouldn't. He listened to the music and stories, and seeing Goewen, the king's footholder, he fell in love with her. His eye usually wandered from storyteller to the lovely girl holding the king's feet, and he thought of her as beautiful as an angel. Soon he became so lovesick that he felt he would risk or give his life to get and have her for his own. But what would the king say? Besides, he soon found out that the maiden Goewen cared nothing for him. Nevertheless, the passion of the love-lorn youth burned hotly and kept increasing. He confided his secret to his brother Goewen and asked his aid, which was promised. So one day the brother went to King Math and begged for leave to go to Pryderi. In the king's name he would ask from him a gift of a herd of swine of the famous breed, which, in the quality of the pork they furnished, excelled all other pigs known. They were finer than any seen in the land or ever heard of before. Their flesh was said to be sweeter, juicier, and more tender than the best beef. Even their manners were better than those of some men. In fact, these famous pigs were a present from the king of Fairyland. So highly were they prized that King Math doubted much whether his nephew could get them at any price. In ancient Wales, the bards and poet-singers were welcomed and trusted above all men, and this whether the palace or the cottage. So Goewen, the brother of the lovesick one, in order to get the herd of surpassing swine, took 10 companions, all young men and strong, dressed as bards, and pretended by their actions to be such. Then they all started out together to seek the palace of Pryderi. Having arrived, they were entertained at a great feast in the castle hall. There Pryderi sat on his throne chair with his feet in a maiden's lap. The dinner over, Goewen was asked to tell a story. This he did, delighting everyone so much that he was voted a jolly good fellow by all. In fact, Pryderi felt ready to give him anything he might demand, excepting always his footholder. At once, Goewen made a request to give him the herd of swine. At this the countenance of Pryderi fell, for he had made a promise to his people that he would not sell or give away the swine until they had produced double their number in the land, for there were no pigs and no pork like theirs to be bought anywhere. Now, this Goewen was not very cunning, but he had the power of using magic arts. By these he could draw the veil of illusion over both the mind and eyes of the people. So he made answer to Pryderi's objections thus: "Keep your promise to your people, O most honoured Pryderi, and only exchange them for the gift I make thee," said Goewen. Here comes the rupture. Gilly sees Goewen holding the king's feet and decides he wants her. Not because she's available, not because she's interested, but because he believes access equals ownership. When she rejects him, His desire flares into entitlement. He enlists his brother, the sorcerer Goewen, to distract the king so he can steal Goewen. This is where the story turns from odd to ominous. Gilly doesn't seduce, he abducts. And Goewen, the girl who was once a ceremonial symbol of status, becomes an unprotected prize, passed between men like a ritual they forgot to explain. Magical pigs. Upon exerting his powers of magic, he created the illusion of 12 superb horses. These were all saddled, bridled, and magnificently caparisoned. But after 24 hours, they would vanish from sight. The illusion would be over. With these steeds, so well fitted for hunting, were 12 sleek, fleet hounds. Taken all together, here was a sight to make a hunter's eyes dance with delight. So Pryderi gave Goewen the swine, and he quickly drove them off. For, he whispered to his companion fellows in knavery, the illusion will only last until the same hour tomorrow. So it happened, for when Pryderi's men went to the stables to groom the horses and feed the hounds, there was nothing in either the stables or the kennels. When they told this to Pryderi, he at once blew his horn and assembled his knights to invade the country of Gwynedd to recover his swine. Hearing of his coming, King Marth went out to meet Pryderi in battle. To distract Marth, Goewen creates a magical con. He uses illusion magic to trick Pryderi, king of another land, into trading his legendary pigs for glamoured horses and hounds that vanish after one day. This fairy tale scam starts a war, but that's the point. Goewen doesn't want pigs, he wants chaos, because while Marth goes to battle, Gilly goes to Goewen. This isn't just manipulation, it's narrative warfare. Goewen rewrites perception, and perception is power. We don't just see magic here, we see misused authorship. The pen becomes a weapon, and the story becomes a trap. Violations. But while he was away with his army, Gilly, the lover, seized the beautiful maiden Goewen, who held the king's feet in her lap. She was not willing to marry Gilly, but he eloped with her and carried her off to his cottage. This is the story's deepest wound. Goewen is, taken. Not wooed, not won, just removed. Stripped of choice, separated from the court, and silenced by circumstance. I think you can infer what happened to her. And what breaks isn't just her safety, it's the ritual itself. Because the Footholder is more than a servant, she's a symbol. She represents the sacred closeness between power and care. When Gilly takes her, he breaks the court's emotional covenant. And no one stops him, because the king is busy. The war is loud, and she was always just part of the furniture. Right? War and single combat. The war which now raged was finally decided by single combat, as was the custom in old days. By this, the burning of the peasants' houses and the ruin which threatened the whole country ended, and peace came. It was not alone by the strength and fierceness of King Marth, but also by the magic spells of Goewen, that Pryderi was slain. After burying the hero, King Marth came back to his palace and found out what Gilly had done. The story attempts to rebalance itself through violent means. Marth confronts Pryderi. There's single combat. Magic is used. The con is exposed. The pigs are reclaimed. But the true damage to Goewen is still waiting in the margin. The war ends, but something bigger is broken here, because fairy tale justice, for all its clarity, is awfully slow to protect women, until now. Goewen's restoration. Then he took Goewen away from Gilly, and to make amends for her trouble in thus being torn from his palace, King Marth made her his queen. Then the lovely Goewen shared his throne covered in the flame-coloured satin. One of the most beautiful maidens of the court was chosen to hold his feet until such time as a permanent choice was made. As for the two nephews who had fled from the wrath of their princely uncle, they were put under bans as outlaws and had to live on the borders of the kingdom. Not one of the king's people was allowed to give them food or drink, yet they would not obey the summons of the king to come and receive their punishment. But at last, tired of being deserted by all good men and women, they repented in sorrow. Hungry, ragged, and forlorn, they came to their uncle, the king, to submit themselves to be punished. When they appeared, Marth spoke roughly to them and said, "You cannot make amends for the shame you have brought upon me. Yet since you obey and are sorry, I shall punish you for a time and then pardon you. You are to do penance for 3 years at the least." This is one of the rarest reversals in all folklore. Goewen is not discarded. She's not ruined. She's elevated. Marth marries her, not as property, but as atonement. It's a symbolic gesture. It doesn't erase the harm done, but it re-anchors her name in the story. She moves from Footholder to Queen, from prop to power, and the story finally acknowledges that what happened to her matters. Animal penance. Then they were changed into wild deer, and he told them to come back after 12 months. At the end of the year, they returned, bringing with them a young fawn. As this creature was entirely innocent, it was given a human form and baptized in the church. But the 2 brothers were changed into wild swine and driven off to find their food in the forest. At the end of the year, they came back with a young pig. The king had the little animal changed into a human being, which, like every mother's child in that time, received a baptism. Again, the brothers were transformed into animal shape, this time as wolves, and were driven out to the hills. At the end of the 12-month period, they came back, 3 in number, for 1 was a cub, so their human nature was restored to them, but they must be washed thoroughly. In the first place, it took much hot water and lye, made from the wood ashes, and then a great deal of scrubbing, to make them presentable. Then they were anointed with sweet-smelling oil, and the king ordered them to be arrayed in elegant apparel. They were appointed to hold honourable office at court, and from time to time to go out into the country to call the officers to attend to public business. Now comes the punishment, and it's poetry. Gilly and Goewen are transformed first into deer, then pigs, then wolves. Each year they return with a baby, innocent, unpunished, and human. This is one of the most symbolic redemption arcs in any myth. Punishment without annihilation, repentance through embodiment, fatherhood without ownership. They don't just suffer, they carry new life, and when they return, changed, they are forgiven, but not before being washed and baptized and redressed. Forgiveness isn't free, but it is possible. A new footholder. When the time came that the king sought for one of the most beautiful maidens who should hold his feet, Goewen nominated to the prince's notice his sister Arianrhod. The king was gracious, and thereafter she held his feet at all the banquets. She was looked upon with reverence by all, and held the office for many years. Thus King Marth's reputation for grace and mercy was confirmed. The end. So the cycle completes. Goewen becomes queen. Arianrhod, Goewen's sister, becomes the new footholder. It's an odd choice, but it does matter, because it says the ritual will continue, not unchanged. It is now grounded in awareness, in experience and remembrance. And Arianrhod's presence reminds us power doesn't just rest at our feet. Sometimes it rises from who we allow to touch us. Last looks. This fairy tale begins with a throne, a cushion, and a woman made into furniture, and ends with her crowned, her name remembered, and her violators walking the earth as animals until they understand what they broke. In a world full of stolen voices and symbolic silencing, this story still speaks. This has been Storybite, and I'm MT Lynx. And if anyone ever tells you your job is just to hold someone's feet, don't forget about Goewen. She rose. And now you know. I'll see you in the next video. This one right here. See you there.